Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a book review of a book called My Friends by Fredrik Backman. Before we get started on that review, I want to talk a bit about my history with Backman. I've read a couple of his books, a couple different books. The first book that I ever read of his was called A Man Called Ove, or I think it's maybe pronounced Uwe is what I've heard. I absolutely adored this book. It is one of, if not maybe my favorite ever standalone book. When I started reading this, I absolutely flew through it. And it made me cry so many times. And at the end of this story, I was laying in bed, reading it at night as my wife had fallen asleep beside me. And I woke her up because I was shaking the bed because I was crying so much and just bawling my eyes out at this absolutely beautiful story. I immediately told my wife that she had to read it, and so she did, and she proceeded to bawl her eyes out throughout the book. But it just holds a really special place in my heart. Man Called Ove, highly recommend this book. The second book I read of his is called Anxious People. I don't have it on me right now because I've lent it to my sister-in-law, so I'll put a photo of it on screen here. That book was also really good. Very different kind of story. It felt really unique when I was reading it. There was different kind of plays between interviewing and story. And yeah, just that book made me feel really happy in the end. There were some sad moments, but it just made me feel really happy at the end of that book and really enjoyed that one as well. I've also read his nonfiction book called Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. This was also a really nice book. It kind of helped give me a bit of a perspective on who Fredrik Backman is as a person outside of his writing. And I love his writing, and so this was really nice to kind of see that. And also just had some like really cool little tidbits and things that forced me to think a little bit and think about, the way that I see life. I don't have any kids. I don't know if I ever will. But if I do, I can see myself coming back to this book and reading it again for sure. Which brings us to My Friends. When I heard this book was coming out, I was really excited because of my past experience with Backman. There's some other books of his that I want to get to, but when I heard this was coming out, I thought, this is awesome. This is going to be a really good book. I'm excited to read it. Based on the cover, I thought this book was going to be a really good summary story. And so I bought it right before going on vacation with my wife. And I just thought, this is going to be perfect. It's going to be the perfect beach read. I'm really going to enjoy this. And in some ways, it is a summary story. But in others, it is very much not. I'll give some spoiler-free thoughts first, and then we'll jump into some spoiler territory. So this story, you follow this teenager named Louisa, and this adult named Ted, who Ted is basically telling Louisa all these different stories about his childhood with his friends. And you're kind of following their story as they learn more about each other and kind of develop their relationship. There are a lot of the things that I've come to expect from Backman in this book. Like I was mentioning with A Man Called Ove and all these other books, a lot of really human moments. I feel like Backman has a way with words in a lot of ways where in just a single sentence or a paragraph, I can go from just reading casually to all of a sudden feeling choked up and crying. And that did happen a couple times in this book. Just really knows how to kind of make his characters feel like real people that you might have known at some point in your life. And so that is definitely present in My Friends. But there was also some other stuff. I kind of felt like there was almost a lot of fluff in this book, things that almost felt like it was there to bump up the word count almost. I definitely feel like this book could have probably been like roughly 50 pages shorter and would have probably benefited from that. The story would have probably benefited from being a little bit more compact in that way, at least in my opinion. As it stands though, I still really did enjoy reading My Friends. The ending felt really nice and kind of tied a lot of loose ends together, which I appreciated. And it was just a touching story, but not necessarily what I would expect from a classic summer read. Okay, so we're going to jump into some spoiler-filled thoughts now. So I'm going to be talking about very specific moments in the story. So if you've not read it yet, come back later. Like I said, I really, really liked this book. Enjoyed a lot of parts of it. Also a lot of parts that I did not find as invigorating. We're going to talk about those. First thing I want to touch on is I really, really liked the relationship that was portrayed between Ted and his brother. I thought it was super duper sweet and just, yeah, really made me feel a lot. Whenever their relationship was being portrayed on the page, I was locked in those moments. The fact that Ted's dad is going through cancer and that Ted can't really remember him before the cancer, but his brother can. And so his brother's telling him stories about who their dad was before, playing the piano for Ted, which his dad taught him. Just all these little moments, the conversations that they have with one another. Ted's brother telling him that he's happy that Ted has good friends, and Ted telling his brother, well, you could make better friends than what you have. Just, I really loved how we got to see how little comments like that can alter the whole path of someone's life. The fact that Ted saying that to his brother ultimately ended up in him not going to a party that would have gotten him in prison, and kind of led him down the path that ended up allowing him to meet his future wife. It was just super cool to be able to see that, and any time that their relationship was on screen, I just wanted more and more of that. And it really made me think when I was reading those moments that I sometimes wish that we could kind of get to see that in our own lives. Get to see when one small comment from someone or one small decision that we've made can really just alter the pathway in different ways. So really loved every time that they were portrayed on the page together. They were just awesome. Really loved that relationship. I liked almost all the scenes between Ted and his friends growing up. I felt like it really portrayed what it feels like to be a kid in the summertime and just not having any responsibilities, having no school, and just kind of getting to do whatever you want with your friends. It really made me remember those times and reminisce on those times for myself. So I really liked those scenes quite a lot. I liked the relationship that was shown between the artist and Christian, and how meeting Christian allowed him to kind of see the potential that he had and really just try his art out on that wall. That was a really beautiful relationship that ended very sadly, but really enjoyed getting to see that, and again getting to see an older person who maybe was struggling in their life a little bit get to mentor a younger person a little bit. I really got to see that relationship. I really like to see at the end, kind of getting to see where everyone ended up in the end of the book, how we got to see what happened to Jor and where he was. When we finally meet Jor in the present timeline and find out that his dad was hit in the head by a rogue beam on the docks and basically completely made him a different person and someone who just had to be taken care of and couldn't really communicate for the rest of his life. And that really just completely subverted my expectation of what was going to happen in the story. Obviously the build-up of so much of it is that Jor is going to end up killing his father, and that's really what I thought was going to happen. I had my money on that for some time throughout the story, and then at some point I started to think maybe that's not what happens. Maybe Jor's father kills him in some beating, and Ali takes it upon herself to go and get revenge of some kind, and I thought maybe Ali would kill Jor's father. I had all these theories speculating in my head. I really did not think for the longest time that Ali or that Jor were alive in the present timeline, and so I was trying to think about what could have possibly happened to them and what could have happened in that relationship. I absolutely despised, as I'm sure you're supposed to, Jor's father. Hated every moment of him being on screen, but I thought that it was a really good conclusion to that story, and getting to see that Jor and his mother kind of got to live their happily ever after a little bit in some kind of way, and some bittersweetness for sure in Jor growing up and defending someone else who was also in a similar situation to what him and his mother were, and finding out later from, I think it was his the woman's father that called him while in prison and let him know that she'd finally left him, and he just made it all worth it for him. That was really great. Yeah, I just really liked that in the end we could kind of preserve some of that innocent nature of being a child and not having to force someone to do something that would have ultimately, changed their whole trajectory in life. Yeah, it was just really well done, I think. And then speaking of Jor, I absolutely loved Jor as a character. Just everything about him, his helping his friends and just being willing to just put himself in harm's way for his friends at any possible moment. Yeah, just every scene when the art teacher is picking on the artist and Jor just kind of turns it around, calls him the owl, and everyone in the class starts hooting, and by the next day the whole school is calling this teacher the owl and no one even knows that it came from Jor. And just all these little moments of him being willing to just throw himself in harm's way. He was such a good character, and I felt so bad for his circumstances in his life. And this is kind of what I mean when I talk about Backman, just creating these characters who you end up falling in love with and you end up feeling for, like they're real people, like this person is a real person who is so good but has just been dealt such a crappy hand in life. And yeah, I loved Jor, loved him as a character, was really happy in the end that he did not kill his father, that he was alive in the present timeline, was incredibly sad that he was not able to be there with the artist at the end because of his house arrest. But just the fact that he had that satisfaction, that he knew that he was able to get the artist out of that town. Really, really loved that. Next, we'll talk a bit about Ali. I really liked Ali as a character as well. From the moment she was introduced, it kind of felt like it rounded out that friend group. At first, I almost felt like, maybe this is a bit awkward, but in the end, you realize, no, this is actually what this friend group needed. I also had an awkward point in the book when Ali was first introduced. My first thought was that her name was Ali, pronounced Ali. And then when I realized that Ali was a girl, I thought, actually, maybe it's Ali. And I started reading her in my head as Ali for, 5-6 pages until eventually you find out that they call her Ali because they want a reference to Muhammad Ali. And I was like, I was right. It was Ali and not Ali. So, yeah, that was a funny moment reading the book, but really liked her as a character as well. I just felt like she really rounded up that friend group and, similar to Jor, just being that person who is willing to put themselves out there for their friends. I was sad ultimately at her ending, even though I know that she would not have had it any other way, and she was the kind of person who wanted to throw herself into things. It was still sad for her to end in that way. I was really hoping for her to have a happy ending with Jor. But again, what Backman does so well is kind of showcasing that in life sometimes just things happen and it doesn't always go the way that you think it will. And so for Ali to, to pass in such a random way just was really, a really good way to kind of showcase that real life happens sometimes. I was also really happy with the ending that Louisa got at the end. The fact that she was able to become a famous artist herself through the help of all the friends that she made along the way. Her kind of backstory with fish and all that kind of stuff, really like that she was able to do that, and a kind of that ending of completing the circle and repeating it, right, where she found another person in a similar position and calls Ted and says, I found one of us. And it's just a really nice way to end that kind of story for her, for her to have been picked up out of the gutter in some ways and taken in by this friend group and these people, and to kind of pass that torch on and continue that. Really liked how her story ended up ending in a lot of different ways. All right, I talked a lot about the things that I really liked about the story. Now I'm going to talk a bit about some of the things that I found I did not love about the story. I mentioned that I felt like the book could have been 50 pages shorter or something like that. I felt there was a lot of repetition in the story, just a lot of repeating things that we've already learnt about or that we've already talked about, and kind of repeating the story over and over. And I guess maybe if you're trying to replicate how a story is actually told, then that's kind of accurate. And this was, a person telling a story to another person. That's kind of what the whole story part of the book was. But I just felt there was a lot of repetition in the book. There were some that was really poignant, and kind of, repetition can help get a point across. And so in some of the moments, the best example that comes to mind is when there's a lot of times when somebody would say something and you would hear the narrator say, that was a new record of the nicest thing that someone had ever said to me, to Louisa, or to Jor, or whatever. That kind of repetition was nice. Every time that it came up, it was like, that's nice to kind of remember that these people are people who have had, terrible circumstances, and people being nice to them is not always something that they're used to. And so that was a really poignant thing, but there was just a lot of repetition, especially I felt with the story aspect of things that, yeah, just, I was like, we already know this. Can we move on? And then on that note, there was also, every time we came back to the present timeline, I kind of found myself thinking, I don't care about this. I want to know what happens in the story. I want to know what happens in the past. And again, like, I think this is part of what Backman was trying to do. He's trying to put you in Luisa's shoes, right? And she's kind of like us. She's like, I just want to know what happens. Tell me what happens. And Ted's like, oh, no, we'll talk about it later. We'll continue the story in a bit. They kind of want you to be, like, craving what happens. And you do. Like, you're sitting there and I'm like, oh man, I want to know what happens in the next, like, I want to know what happens in the past. I want to know how we got here. I want to know what happens to these people. And I really like the way that Luisa put it, where, they're telling this story and Ted's saying, it's okay, like, don't worry about it. It happened a long time ago. And Luisa says, but it's happening to me right now. And I thought that was really poignant, like that idea and that concept of, I'm learning about this right now, and so it's happening to me right now, even though it happened a long time ago. That was really cool. And I liked that concept, and I feel like I want to take that with me in the future. But just in general, the waiting, I think it was supposed to be an addition to the book. To me, it was kind of like a detraction from the book. I just wanted to know what was happening, and for the longest time, up until maybe like the last quarter of the book, I was just not interested in what was happening in the present timeline. I just wanted to know what was happening in the past and how we got there. And then I think in terms of that, when we were talking about the past, there were just certain decisions that Backman made that just made absolutely no sense to me. The main one being that we were calling, when Ted was telling the story, he just kept calling the artist. And sometimes when people are using that kind of thing in a book, it's because they're waiting for this big reveal of, oh wait, what? The artist has been Jor this whole time, kind of thing, right? Like that's kind of what they're waiting for. They're wanting you to know that, oh, you've met this person in the future, and I'm telling you this story, and wait a second, that person that I know, that was that person the whole time, and that's the connection. And that can be used really effectively in books, and it can be a really like poignant, just shocking moment. But in this, you know that the artist has passed away. You know that he's died. You've met him already. You know he's dead. And so when we're telling this story in the past, and at first we found out that the artist's name is C. Jat, and at some point I realized, well, when he keeps calling him the artist, I was like, okay, obviously that's not his name. Once we met Ali, I realized, okay, G-A-T, that must be Jor, Ali, and Ted. Maybe the C stands for the artist's name. And then we met Christian. I was like, okay, no, the C is probably for Christian. And so I kind of called that, and I felt good about myself in a way for calling that. But the fact that we just continuously refer to him as the artist the whole time, up until like 3/4 of the way through the book, or almost something like that, and then we find out that his name is Kim, or Kim, because the nickname that he got. I don't know if that was supposed to be some kind of like big reveal and that we were supposed to be excited for that, but by the time we got to finally knowing or learning the artist's name, I just felt like I don't care at all. Like, what, like, this whole thing, why did we go through it? Why did we add that? So that was one that I was not on board with that decision the whole time. It just kind of felt annoying that we weren't getting this artist's name when there was, in my mind, no reason to hide that from Luisa or from the reader. Overall, I did like this book. I think actually I liked it quite a lot. There were a lot of things that I really liked about it, even though there were some things that I did not like about it as much. I think I just didn't like it as much as his past works, is what it ultimately was. Some of his past works are maybe my favorite books of all time, and so this was not quite up there, but I still really liked it. I'd probably give it a 3.5 stars out of 5. So it's not like this was a bad book by any means, and don't let what I've just kind of shared make you think that. I really enjoyed this book. This book really told a story about a group of kids who grew up in a really tough situation in a small town, and how they helped each other to get through that situation. It's a story about how cycles repeat themselves and how they continue, but also how you can break those cycles and move past it. It's a very emotional story in a lot of ways. And like I was saying at the beginning, maybe not a beach read per se, because it is really emotional, but a really, really good book. It was a book, in my mind, ultimately about friendship, and to me, friendship is just an amazing thing, and so how can you be upset about a book about friendship? And I suppose being called My Friends, right? Could have guessed that. And even though I do still think the book could have probably been about 50 pages shorter, I would definitely recommend this book to read if anybody wants to get that feeling what it's like to be a kid, wants to get that feeling what it's like to be in the summer again, and just wants to read a really beautiful story about friendship, then My Friends is a highly recommended book from me. So tell me in the comments if you've read either My Friends or any other of Backman's books, and which book of his you think I should maybe move on to next in the future. Really looking forward to chatting with you again soon. And good night, ghosts.